Hurricane Lee, a Category 4 hurricane, and the Air Force reconnaissance aircraft is there even as we speak, and they should be sending OBS back shortly. I will be taking a look at that. We've had quite a bit of severe weather around parts of the Northeast and parts of the Southeast, and Joe Rayo will be doing his fantastic radar tour on this. We'll have the weekend, the long range, ideas on what Lee may do in that long range. All of that coming up momentarily on the Joe and Joe Weather Show on this Thursday, the 7th of September. And it's brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, in southwest Suffolk County on Long Island. And they serve the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, tri-state area with everything you need as far as mulch, topsoil, and sand, salt this coming winter. And, of course, might be a good reminder to make sure your house is in order with respect to hurricane things. Make sure everything is up and working. So head over to Omni for that because they've got the best prices in town. 631-756-1125. The phone number, the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
And Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. You can join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board with the referral link. And it's also on the descriptor to this video. If you do make a purchase on the Tempest website of this or anything else that they have, because they have lots of weather gadgets and gizmos and smart weather fashion, use the coupon code I want a weather station, because deep down inside we know you do. And if you do, you get...
You're going to get a big 10% off, Joe.
That's right. Okay, so we've got obviously a few things going on. We're going to do the severe weather that's going on at the moment and take a look at the radars, and Joe Rayo will be doing that in just a couple of seconds. And then we're going to go on to Hurricane Lee because there's an Air Force reconnaissance aircraft that's literally just getting there. So if we'll do the radars first, maybe by the time we're done, we'll have some important observations to look at from the standpoint of Hurricane Lee. So good evening to everybody on the chat board. Welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show. I'm Joe Cioffi. He's Joe Rayo, my colleague and friend of 40-plus years. Those of you who are watching in the background, also welcome. Subscribe to my YouTube channel because we're on Monday through Thursdays at 7:35. We will be on Saturday. We're normally off Fridays and Saturdays, but we will be on Saturday at 12 noon. Okay, so we'll have the new GFS coming out right at 12 noon so we can see what's going on with the models in Lee. And also back on Sunday at 7:35 p.m. So noon on Saturday, 7:35 p.m. on Sunday. Turn your notifications on for all you new subscribers so this way you don't miss it. And I guess that's all I have to say. So, Mr. Rayo, I think you're going to need to do this. Hold on. Share and let me see if I can fix it on my end. This is getting to the point of being ridiculous. But, you know, technology, Joe, technology.
Yes, yes.
All right. You might have to do a share and share again thing.
All right. So I'll just stop sharing.
Right.
Which I've just done. And now I'm going to reshare. I do hope we have something on the reshare.
I see you. And, oh, it lost it again. Let's, you know, the best laid plans of mice and men. Let's try this. Sometimes this works for me. Okay. All right. Try one more time to share again. Unshare and share.
Okay, we've unshared. And now we're going to try to share one more time.
Well, it's there. I see it. I don't know if they can see it on the screen. Hold on. One more. All the new people watching are thinking, what is going on with these people? Okay, now it's up there. All right. Knock yourself out, Joe.
Okay, well, the first view is going to be from our friends over at Upton, out in eastern Long Island. Their radar is lighting up over portions of Orange County, especially, and on up into Ulster County. And I know for a fact that is happening because literally moments before we came on the air, telephone here rang, and it was my daughter up in the New Paltz area exclaiming that there's a magnificent light show going on in the sky, that the sky is lighting up like every 2 or 3 seconds from lightning, which apparently is being generated by what you're seeing on your screen now, all of that red hue that is crossing through portions of Orange County and on up into Ulster. That is thunderstorm activity, rather potent thunderstorm activity. Now, much of the Hudson Valley is underneath, as well as portions of northern New Jersey, is underneath a severe thunderstorm watch until 9 o'clock tonight. And it looks like the severe storms are going to be concentrating mostly on areas to the north and west of New York City. And you can see, again, most of this activity, particularly so over portions of Orange and Ulster, and also across portions of Sullivan County as well. Places to the west of the Hudson River seemingly are getting hit hard right now. But as you can see, the movement basically toward the east-northeast. At the moment, I have nothing here in Putnam Valley, but if this holds together, we may very well see some activity of our own in the next 30 or 40 minutes. So we'll keep an eye on that. Let's go to another radar. Let's go to the one in Albany and see what they have showing. And they have an area that is just moving across the Capital District right now, but it is kind of fading out as the loop progresses. This area right here, this band of rather hefty precipitation, also sort of dissipating a bit as it came across, well, let's see, up across, I guess that's Utica, Rome, this region right here. And we also are seeing the activity down over northwestern New Jersey and also into Orange and Ulster County and Sullivan County, although it doesn't show up quite as intense on the Albany radar as it does from the Upton radar. Obviously, because Upton's a little bit closer, the intensity is more significant or more robust. Let's check out down toward Philadelphia. Actually, Dover Air Force Base and Ellendale. And you can see that a lot of the activity is to their north. There's not really much happening, although in Amish country, in the southeastern portion of Pennsylvania, we are seeing some locally strong activity, probably around the Harrisburg area. Here's Philadelphia. They are not seeing much of anything. Again, a lot of the activity is passing off to the north and northwest of Philly. But again, some activity flaring up now over portions of southeastern Pennsylvania. And there are also a few locally strong cells down here over southern Maryland, well south of the Washington, D.C. area, which really is not getting much of anything at the moment. But you see this one cell here that is about ready, I guess, to cross Chesapeake Bay. But again, most of the activity right now, Joe, seems to be in areas over eastern Pennsylvania, northwestern New Jersey, and the lower Hudson Valley of New York. Any other place you want to check out?
Let's look at western, north, and South Carolina, please.
All righty, let's check out, well, here's Columbia, South Carolina. A lot of activity going on just to the south and to the west of Columbia. Look at this area right here, very potent, moving across central and north central South Carolina, and then edging into central sections of North Carolina. And again, rather potent activity there. Also, there's some activity over eastern and southeastern sections of Georgia, not as strong as what we've just seen in other areas, but again, probably some moderate rainfall occurring with these cells down here. Let me go over to another radar. Let's check out Raleigh-Durham. Not really showing all that much. In fact, there's some activity over in South Central Virginia that's showing up, but nothing really until you get to the final few frames of this loop. That's that activity I said in South Carolina that's edging into South Central North Carolina, right about over here. So not as prolific as what we're seeing locally here in the New York metropolitan area or in the Hudson Valley, but yeah, there's some locally strong cells, sporadic cells here and there across the Carolinas as well.
All right, so I think that'll cover that, and we'll probably come back to some of this a bit later on. So I think we can go to Hurricane Lee. And we're going to start tonight with the satellite loop. And Lee has been deepening or intensifying rapidly. I actually, rolled the frames back about 6 hours or so, and you can see how well defined it goes from. You could barely see the eye on the first frame, and then all of a sudden you just got this really well-defined eye. And now that we're in the infrared for the nighttime, it appears on the last few frames, Joe, that the eye is the diameter of the eye is shrinking a little bit. So this round of rapid intensification may not be done yet. Uh, the Air Force reconnaissance aircraft is there at right now. Now they're sending some obs back, and I'll punch that up in a second. But you do see the obvious feathering of the clouds. The intensification process is going to continue. Now we're probably going to get into some eye wall replacement cycles along the way over the next couple of days. So we'll probably see the pressure bottom out. You'll get an eye wall replacement cycle where the eye wall collapses and then a new eye wall forms. So when that happens, the pressures tend to rise a little bit, and then once the new eye wall gets underway, we could have another round of intensification. I think this is going to get to a 5. It seems to it's already well on its way. This morning, we went from a 4 pretty quickly just based on their satellite estimates, and I can tell you, at least from the first recon, there it is. There's the recon. So let me just refresh this data here, and they have a pressure. I mean, I'm just going to estimate here. The pressure is in is the red line.
NYJ 278 says the recon found 928 millibars.
Yeah, on this was at the one I have on the graph here is 2337. So at 737, the graph on their flight in, it looks like it's down under 930. I mean, it's the red line is above 925, but below the 935 line. And the blue line representing the wind, Joe, up at almost to 145 knots at flight level. So, they usually do a little bit of a correction there, takes it to about 135 knots. I mean, they certainly could carry 155 on the next advisory, which is just about knocking on the door of a Category 5 hurricane. And let me get the flight graphic here.
Just in case you're wondering, 928 millibars, when translated into inches of mercury, 27.4 inches. And again, as Joe mentioned, it's just getting progressively deeper as time wears on. And in fact, I pointed this out on Facebook, Joe, in 45 years. Now, maybe you can remember. I certainly don't, though. But in 45 years of, doing this sort of thing, and when I started, and when you started too, they were only giving hurricane forecasts, both for coordinate positions and intensities, out to 72 hours. They have now extended that. But I do not remember on any of those weather discussions ever seeing a prediction for a hurricane to peak at 165 miles per hour. That is the prediction from the Hurricane Center. As of 5 o'clock today, they are predicting that will be the case tomorrow at 2 o'clock Eastern time, 165 mile per hour. That's certainly well above Category 5. I mean, my goodness, this is going to go down in weather annals as one of the more intense hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin in modern history.
Well, I mean, if we go back far enough, I mean, I think if you start going back to, say, prior to 2000, the technology was relatively primitive compared to what we have now.
Right.
And even from the standpoint of forecasting for intensification, I mean, there were numerous times where, these storms, because the Hurricane Center folks, forecasters will tell you that intensity is a whole lot different it's a whole different ball game forecasting intensity as opposed to forecasting track. So they have a lot. They have a good. They made a lot of great progress with track. They've made progress with intensity, but there's still a lot of variables here. And oftentimes you get these rapid deepening situations that would catch them and us by surprise with regards to some of these storms. And I love this shot because those are the wind barbs, and there's a plane icon there, and it looks like if you just look at it at first glance, it looks like the plane is actually literally flying out of the eye instead of above it. I mean, it just, or he has it overlaid that way, but the eye is almost perfectly circular here. So you've got a really wrapped up system when you see something like this. I mean, this is really phenomenal. I'm just looking at the wind barbs in terms of the colors of the wind barbs, Joe, and I'm seeing, these colors. I see 113 to 137, and then I see the pink, the other pink wind barb is 137 plus. So they've got a bunch of wind barbs here on the west side of the center with winds of 137 knots at flight level. So I mean, if this isn't a 5 right now, it's extremely close, and it's definitely going to get there. I mean, there's no question. All right, we'll be checking the recon again from time to time. So let's just go to the 5 p.m. advisory position, which was at 16.9 north and 51.3 west. They were carrying 130. Well, John, what was the pressure on the advisory that they carried? Could you check that for me, please?
I will check.
And that was based off satellite estimates. So now they have the actual pressure. 130 on the wind was at the 5 o'clock advisory, moving west-northwest at 15. So I'm thinking if they're gonna carry 150 or 155, they may issue a special advisory just to point out the fact that this thing is just about a Category 5 hurricane.
Well, if what I'm seeing is true here, the 5 o'clock advisory had a central minimum pressure of 953 millibars, and as we just noted, the aircraft that's now near the center of this thing, only 3 hours later, reporting a central minimum pressure of 928.
Right.
Is that really?
Well, the 953 is a satellite estimate, so we don't really know what the actual pressure was at 5 o'clock.
All right.
Or when they looked at the shot, maybe they looked at the shot at 4 o'clock and based the pressure on the 4 o'clock shot. But I mean, odds are, Joe, the pressure was lower than 953 at that point, because usually the satellite estimates tend to be conservative.
Well, I'll tell you, this is a real monster already, and it's going to only get stronger. As I pointed out yesterday or last night on our discussion, to try to define the exact strength, because it probably is going to go through more than a few eyewall cycles, replacement cycles. And they mentioned that also on today's technical discussion out of the Hurricane Center. But this is really one for the books. And I'm sure, we've had the name Lee come up several times over the last 12 or 18 years or whatever. I think this is going to be the last time that we're ever going to see the name Lee mentioned. This certainly is going to be worthy of, even if it doesn't make landfall anywhere and doesn't cause any significant damage, and we all hope that will be the case. But regardless, for what it's doing right now, I'm sure the name Lee is going to be retired.
Mark G hitting the super chat tip jar tonight. Thank you, Mark. He says, "Thank you, Joe and Joe, for doing this show. For the weather enthusiasts, we greatly appreciate the live stream. Folks, enjoy the show and chat. Don't forget to hit the like button. We're at 74 likes. So if you like the show, hit the like button, because we love it when we go over 100. It makes us happy."
By the way, I remember 35 years ago, the TV show Nova, which is on PBS, did a documentary on Hurricane Gilbert. And I remember that there was a large segment of that documentary where they filmed from the Hurricane Hunter aircraft. And that storm was, in terms of barometric pressure and intensity, that was a storm for the books as well. And I remember when they were in the cockpit on the flight deck talking to the guy who was flying the plane and telling him that they wanted him to go into the eye wall. And the guy was saying something to the effect like, okay. They were already getting bumped around quite a bit, and now they're talking about, wow, this was really going to be quite a ride. I can only imagine what it would be like right now on that aircraft that's investigating Lee and giving us this very important data.
Well, here's one also you don't see too often. This is 5 days, a 5-day forecast that the Hurricane Center has, and it's a straight line, a west-northwest course from now right through 2 p.m. Tuesday, when it's inside 65 degrees west, between 65 and 70 degrees west. It's still south of 25. All M's, Joe. M&M's, all M's, major, 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 major. And it is going to remain a major hurricane for the next 5 days while it continues to traverse this very warm water. And the forecast model tracks still remain very tightly clustered. You've got a couple of them that you've got 3 of them now that veer it a little more to the west later in the forecast period, while the rest of them start to turn it more northwest toward 30 and 70, going out 168 hours. Those seem to be the faster models. The other ones are a little bit slower, and it could also be how the models are interpreting the ridge that's to the north of the storm. That's going to be a very, very important factor here in how far west it gets. And also bear in mind now with the reconnaissance aircraft there, they're getting all sorts of data that they can put into the models that they didn't have. And but not only with regards to the strength of the hurricane, but also the strength of the surrounding atmosphere. That might give us a good indication of the ridging that's developing to the north of the storm and to the northwest of the storm. Again, that is going to be important to how far west this gets. And here's an intensity model. The intensity models on this graphic, I'll make it a little bigger so everybody can see. It's not often that you see this, but all of them, every single intensity model has it at least a category 3. You have a bunch of them as a category 4. That they see most in the category 4 position, but you have quite a few models having it as a category 5 hurricane, and these were the 18Z intensity guidance. So now now they're seeing that they may already have that. So this usually will get updated. The next one's at 0Z, and that usually comes out about at 9 o'clock Eastern time. So we won't have it for this show, but I'm sure we'll probably see more of them up in that category 5 area. And also notice that even out to 144 and 156 hours, you still have a fair amount of models that have it still as a Cat 3. And of course, by this time, we're talking about maybe being in a position that's north of 30 degrees north and having to deal with the cold eddy that exists between Bermuda and North Carolina. So it'll be interesting to see how the models in the longer term all interpret this. And speaking of which, we might as well go to those models. And I'm just going to say one thing. I'll start with the European model from today, because that once that hit, everybody went crazy with it. I'm gonna use the North America view, because we need to look at both coasts as well as what's going on offshore. And I'm just going to roll this back.
And if you remember what I said last night, my gut feeling was that, okay, I believe, this is from yesterday now or last evening. I believe that the New York, New Jersey region is going to be out of it, just out of it, but out of it. But I did say that from Cape Cod to down East Maine to Nova Scotia, I would still be quite concerned, because there's always that possibility that the system may make a turn more to the west. If it does, I think it's going to be more of an influence on those areas as opposed to the New York tri-state area, New Jersey. Although I did note, Joe, that the Hurricane Center has indicated that beginning over the weekend, that once again, thanks to the agitating effect of Lee, that the swells the rip currents, the undertow, all that sort of stuff is going to be increasing, not only in the New York area, but I mean mostly right up and down the Atlantic seaboard from this storm. So whether or not you're going to get hit directly or whether or not it stays offshore, it's still going to have some kind of an influence on the weather and on the oceans, no matter where you are across much of the eastern seaboard during the upcoming week.
Oh, no question. Let me acknowledge 2 super chat hits, and then we'll go on to the upper air. David Fuller hitting super chat saying this will be fun to track. Atlantic City water temperature of 80 degrees. That's nice. Shelf water. 12Z Euro brought it closer. We're going to talk about that right now. Brandon Doherty hitting super chat. And thank you, Brandon. And he says, to my 2 great professors, you have taught me so much. And by December, I will have received my meteorological certificate from Penn State. That's terrific. Congratulations to Brandon Doherty, and thanks for hitting the tip jar. Now let's do some upper air, because this is not simple. And I'm just going to put this on the record, Joe, and I think you will agree with this. I'm just going to say, just because the European does something doesn't make it right. And I know there's this sort of reflexive reaction.
You realize how the European has been living off of that forecast that it made for Hurricane Sandy in 2012, ever since that 2012 outlook that it made 6 days in advance, showing the curve, the sharp left curve into central New Jersey. Everybody has been bowing down to the European, saying it is the king of all mid and long range forecast models, which, it's a very good model, but it's not always correct.
Right. It's not always correct. And
right.
There's so much going on here. The strength of the ridge offshore. We also have a new tropical storm, Margaret, which is going to be out near 40 West and become a hurricane. And that's going to have some impact here because it's going to affect the ridge. And the ridge here is very important, that Atlantic ridge.
Right.
On the other side, you've got a million short waves running around across the U.S. It's a very complicated situation. And we're still dealing with, models that are trying to get to a point where we can have some clarity on how all these shortwaves are going to interact with each other, plus the fact that you've got this ridge that we're dealing with. So, this was one run on one afternoon. Talk to me if we're still seeing this on Sunday, okay? Because we're only at Thursday. All right, so in the meantime, let's run through this, and I'll start off by just outlining for those of you who may not know what I'm talking about when I say the ridge. Out here in the Atlantic, we have an upper high, and the steering winds are generally going east to west. Lee is tucked in squarely in the middle of that ridge. We have a trough now that runs from James Bay all the way down into the southeastern part of the United States. There's actually an upper low sitting over me. Here's the old heat ridge, which is kind of retreated back a little bit to the west in West Texas and on the Mexico side of New Mexico and Arizona. And then we have a trough that's out in the Atlantic that's over in 180. Your flow from Canada remains cut off for now. So, this of course, we have this heat wave this week in the eastern part of the United States. Now we've got this trough along the East Coast that is not going to be going anywhere. So that's going to continue the risk for showers and thunderstorms and severe weather again for tomorrow. I'll go back to the Storm Prediction Center later to show you the forecast that they have for tomorrow, because they do have severe weather risk, and they've expanded it for the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states. So going forward, the ridge builds westward, and at the same time, Lee is still tucked in underneath that and continues to move on a west-northwest course. You can see it here. This is by Sunday evening, how tucked in it is. I mean, this is the outline of the ridge. By the way, here we go. This is what I was talking about here with Margaret, which is forecast to also strengthen gradually to a hurricane. Now, that they look like they're close to each other, but they're actually about 900 miles apart. So they're pretty far apart. You still have some troughing here in the east, but then Sunday night you've got another trough that is dropping down from Hudson Bay southwest to Lake Winnipeg. There's a ridging that is going on in western Canada that is building. You have a cutoff low in the Gulf of Alaska. So there's all this noise, and somehow we have to puzzle piece all this going forward. Now, what the European did, it still has it tucked in under the ridge. We're moving through Tuesday, and now we suddenly have this lovely looking trough with a cutoff low over Wisconsin. The ridge, the upper ridge is right in there, okay? Margate has now split that ridge in two. There's a weakness. It exploits the weakness, splits the ridge in two, and moves northward. So there's another upper high to the east of that. So Lee's trapped under that one. Margate is in between the two ridges. Here's your deep trough. You've got a southwest flow from North Carolina onto Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. Now, if this were to just remain unchanged beyond Wednesday and just stay like this, Lee would probably recurve right around that upper high and then go, follow the edge of that ridge all the way around, get into that faster flow off of the New England coast, maybe get closer to Cape Cod from the south and then go out east-northeast. But as we know, it's not going to stay like this. It's going to change. And Lee is moving northwestward now. And, I saw this when I saw this afternoon, this 168-hour, where the ridge is actually kind of cradling around, according to the European. And then you've got this upper low and trough, with a almost southerly flow now along the eastern seaboard. I just kind of said, okay, that's interesting. That's not good. But we also have an upper low dropping down from Great Slave Lake toward Lake Winnipeg. There's another shortwave trough and a vigorous shortwave trough that is dropping southeastward. So that's going to, instead of this eastern trough just sitting here now, it's going to get kicked away by that next shortwave that's coming down. So that makes the forecast even more complicated. You can see the upper low pulls rapidly northward, and then a new trough drops down pretty far to the west into the western lakes. And I think that's the reason why you see this on the European anyway, moving it northwestward until it gets almost to 40 and 70, Joe. It got to 39 and 69 when I looked at it on the close-up map. And then it gets very close to Cape Cod and into Maine as this second trough now deepens and drops down southward along 90 degrees west. That's not good. If you look at the European, if you look at the European, if that trough to the west is a little deeper and a little sharper, you could, and if the ridge is a little stronger, you could see Lee getting a little bit further to the west before it makes that northward move up the east coast. However, right. Again, doesn't mean that it's right.
This is just one run, or actually, you're looking now at the 12Z, and the 18Z, I think, continued. Well, the 18Z goes only out to 90 hours.
90 hours.
So,
now here's the GFS, which recognizes all these puzzle pieces, but what the GFS says is that lead upper low takes longer to get out of the way, so it turns Lee northward faster than the European does, so that by the time the second trough is coming down and you see it there, Lee is already well east of Cape Cod and going barreling into Nova Scotia. It's certainly a plausible solution. But the models seem to be recognizing all these different pieces. So the question is, which one of these has got the better, which one is the better idea? You could argue that the GFS would be more in line with what we've seen through much of the summer. The long wave that the European has is a little bit out of character to what the pattern has been. On the other hand, that doesn't mean that the European can't be right either. So, and you sort of see, of course, there's Margate way to the east that just basically meanders around because Lee is really close by. They briefly do a little, Fujiwara thing here where the Margate's trying to move westward and then just sort of bounces back eastward, and then they both sort of go up together. Actually, Margaret winds up getting absorbed by the post-tropical storm that Lee would become. And that was on the GFS that I just showed you. I want to show you the European surface here, and then the GFS surface. So let's get a look at that.
Somebody asked who. It's already off the chat board, so I'll have to roll back. But somebody was asking about. So if it gets up to Cape Cod or Maine, it was David Scott. David Scott says, if this goes into Cape Cod or Maine, what category storm are you talking? Well, the waters are going to be noticeably chillier as opposed to the waters that the thing is over right now. You just can't simply shut the energy down, though, rapidly. There's going to be a certain amount of momentum, if you will, and the forward speed of the storm also needs to be taken into account. So now he's saying like maybe a category 1. I'd say it could be a 2 or even a 3 if it moves quickly enough or rapidly enough.
I think we're seeing also some baroclinic energy getting involved here. If you look at this, because for a couple of things, the European pressure here when it's down in off the southeast coast is like 960, 961. And that could be off, and more than likely it is. It probably will be, the pressure will be lower when it's in the southern portion, and when it gets north of Bermuda, it gets to a 967. But I think the fact that when you see it moving northward, that the pressure actually drops, moving up along 70 from 967 back down to 963, and then on the coast of Maine, it's in the 950. What is that? A 956 or a 96? Oh, it's a 966. I mean, to me, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, it almost at this point looks post-tropical. I could be wrong, but it does. The European would say heavy rains would get to the back edge of the heavy rains, eastern Connecticut, eastern Long Island. Boston gets very heavy rain. Coastal Maine gets heavy rain. The Cape gets absolutely clobbered with rain and wind. The gradient here is crazy tight.
Right.
I took a sounding look here at Cape Cod when the low center's at 42.2 and 68.7. And Cape Cod is, roughly at about 42 and 69, 9-ish. But I took a sounding from there, and I'll just bring this up. They've got the 950 millibar wind is something that's like 60 knots. So they'll be blowing away with this gradient. Actually, it'll probably be kind of windy. If this were correct, it would probably be on the windy side, right down the coast on the back side of this. But the European brings it very, very close. Actually makes a landfall in Maine, in down east Maine, and then goes into New Brunswick, and then moves rapidly northward from there. Whereas the GFS late today, it wasn't that much different than the 12Z, Joe. Brings it up. You see it here a little bit faster, but it never really quite gets to 70 degrees west, and then it turns northeastward and goes into Nova Scotia, eastern parts of Nova Scotia. So what is that? Maybe about 200 miles or so from there to down east Maine.
Right.
So there's about a 200-mile spread. You could say we could split the difference if you want, and then it goes into closer to Halifax or just west of Halifax if this were correct. But again, we're still at the point where we're looking at individual single model runs here from day to day, and we're still a full week away. I mean, a week from today,
that's scary. That's scary because there is still a lot. Let me underscore that word: a lot of wiggle room over a span of, let's say, 7 or 8 days. So this thing, where it is right now, I would feel a lot better if it was, further out to the east, because the trend is your friend, Joe. Sometimes maybe this is not going to be our friend. If the trend is more west with each run, that could put the tri-state area in within the boundaries of possible trouble or problematic conditions. But again, I think right now from Cape Cod on north and east. Those are the places that really, even though we're more than a week away, we really needs to be concerned about this.
My never to be humble opinion, if it's going to impact southern New England and coastal New Jersey, you're going to need to get this. You're going to have to see the hurricane get to at least 71 or 72 west while it's down near 30 north. Because if it's closer to 70 west, or if it's inside, if it's just outside of 70 west when it's already starting to move northwestward, that would probably mean that southern New England and points south and west will just get, whatever it is they get with respect to on the backside with wind and not much else. And it would look like you would look like the European, because the European takes it up virtually right along 70, all the way up to 40 north. It's like it's just east of 40 and 70. Now the Mrs. Ensembles or ensembles, Mrs. Ensembles, on the other hand, as a few people have been pointing this out, the ensembles on the GFS are all offshore except for one member that gets it to about 40 and 70, and that's it. The rest of them are all out. There's a bunch that get them up near Nova Scotia, but that's it. So that's the GFS ensembles, and the European ensembles today. So we'll get Mrs. Ensemble's cousin from Europe on board here. So if you look at Mrs. Ensembles, there's a little more variability with the European. You got a bunch of members that are faster and try to bring it up. You got a few members that are just east of Cape Cod. There's one there southeast of Montauk. There's one there east of it's got a 946 pressure, Joe, with one member that's southeast of Atlantic City. And it goes inland right over New York City as a 949.
Yeah.
Just one member. But you can see where the vast majority of all the members are. They're offshore. So for ensemble fans, you have that. There's this. So to me, the practical way to look at this is let the upper air do what it's going to do. We sort of know how that's, how complicated that is. I'm going to be trying to pay attention to see if there's more of a westward motion going forward. In other words, that turn to the northwest takes a little bit longer, so that instead of going to say 67 or 68, it gets to 70, maybe, and if it were to get to 71 or 72 before it made the turn, it would be telling you that the ridge in the Atlantic is having a bigger impact here, and that the trough to the west might wind up being sharper. So those are the clues to look for over the weekend and into early next week, to see if that west-northwest track continues, and if it continues longer than what models are suggesting right now. That's going to, I think, be the ultimate driver here in terms of what we're going to finally wind up dealing with.
And this is going to be the second consecutive year that Nova Scotia apparently is going to be close to or in the bullseye. Remember last year, it was right about this time, we had Fiona.
Yes.
That hit them. And now, a lot of people don't think, a lot of people say, oh, hurricanes. They think about, the Florida Peninsula or the Gulf of Mexico or whatever like that. But in recent years, Nova Scotia's had its fair share of hits. And this looks like another one where it may very well be on the hit parade too.
By the way, it's been 33 years. When was Hurricane Bill? Was that, or Bob? When was Hurricane Bob?
1991.
91. So it's 32 years since New England has gotten a direct hit from a hurricane. 32 years. That's a long time between drinks, folks. So just pointing that out here. So
wait a minute, didn't we have one last year, the year before, that hit like Rhode Island?
I don't think there's been a landfalling. No, I don't think there's been a landfalling hurricane in New England since Bob.
One of our hurricane experts on the chat board may be able to correct or come up. Yeah, Dub says Juan 2004 was bad as well in Halifax, and in fact, the funny thing about Juan, About 6 months later, they had a tremendous blizzard that hit Nova Scotia, and they referred to it as White Juan.
Yeah. Tom Contino, baroclinic deep energy, baroclinic deepening. So the way winter storms intensify, where the strengthening of the upper low and the trough tilting negative and all the rest of it. Um, they sometimes when tropical systems get to this latitude, if you have a strong enough upper air feature, it will exert its influence on that tropical system as it transitions over to a post-tropical storm. And there have been cases of hurricanes that, at least by the standpoint of pressure, have actually gotten stronger when they made that post-tropical transition, because they get that extra added cold core energy than as opposed to once they start to lose their tropical characteristics. I think that explains it pretty well.
And somebody on the chat board mentioning, and this was the one that I was making reference to, Hurricane Henri, which was a minimal Category 1 hurricane that impacted the northeastern United States. I do believe it made landfall somewhere along the Rhode Island coastline on a Sunday. In fact, I seem to remember that being a Sunday landfall. But
Could be. I mean, my memory is not what it used
exactly,
to be.
I mean, compared to what we're potentially looking at a week or 10 days from now, Henri was like,
Yeah.
And so,
All right, so this fix is delayed clearly. So at 0017, the plane measured on the graphic anyway, it says 936. Okay, but the other graphic that I showed you had that that down at 928, which is there might be, this is playing catch up, so it might be behind. It's 823. This is only 6 minutes old. Well, the plane is now is from 6 minutes ago, but that could be the first fix, and that they've already done that second fix as they fly around. Look at all the wind barbs here, 113 to 130. I think that's just looking at the scale. No, these darker pinks here, Joe, that's 137 knots or stronger at flight level, and it's not just one wind barb. There's a whole bunch of them. Wow, I mean, this is really impressive. The purple goes out quite a ways. So this is all hurricane force winds that you see in purple in the northeast quadrant, which is where the plane is now. So let's go back. I just want to see if there's a new fixed chart here. No, not yet. So this was you see the peak wind there on this chart was just above 145 knots, and the pressure 925 is at the bottom, 935. So that red V there goes below 930. So that's where they got that 928 pressure fix. So anyhow, Trish Sparaccio just hit the tip jar, Joe. Thank you, Trish. Most appreciated. Okay, so back to the Storm Prediction Center. I just want to cover this for tomorrow. The Storm Prediction Center now has a slight risk for pretty much the same areas as today. It almost looks like today's slight risk. From northern Virginia, much of Maryland, central and eastern PA, northwest New Jersey. It's a little bit further north in the Hudson Valley. Much of upstate New York and just about the whole state of Vermont. Marginal risk on either side of that. Marginal risk goes all the way down to the Florida Panhandle, and then you've got some patches of marginal risk over Louisiana, over Oklahoma, and over parts of Nebraska. And for now, and only because the day 3 outlook only gets updated once. Actually, now they've just updated this, Joe. This is for Saturday. So Saturday we have, again, marginal to slight risk from the mountains of western Virginia northeastward, northwest Virginia and slight risk, northeastern West Virginia and slight risk, much of central and eastern PA, northern New Jersey to about New York City, most of Connecticut, most of Massachusetts, up through Vermont, New Hampshire, and into Maine. So more severe weather to deal with this frontal boundary that's going to be stalled out, with the upper trough stalled out to our west. There's going to be more thunderstorms to deal with over the next few days.
Yeah, and to put the emphasis probably on the as we saw it today. Today was actually bright and sunny for much of the day. He was able to do a little bit of lawn work outside. and of course sweltering too. But it waited until late in the afternoon and evening before we started seeing the storms fire up, and that probably will be the case again tomorrow, and probably will be again the case on Saturday as well. So if you have any plans over the next few days, it's not going to be a complete and total washout, but there will be like the sword of Damocles hanging over our respective heads, the threat of some heavy downpours and maybe some strong gusty winds from thunderstorms. But again, most of that usually coming late in the day and into the first part of the night.
WPC is very bullish on rainfall for the next 7 days. So this takes us through next Thursday night. But a lot of this is over the weekend. But they've got several inches or more from Northeast Virginia all the way up through Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire. We're talking, 3-4 inches of rain at least spread out over the next 7 days. And of course, it's convective, which means that it could certainly wind up being double the amounts being forecast in some local areas. Inch and a half goes all the way down to western South Carolina. We also have some heavy rains across Texas, north central Texas, into Oklahoma, into northwest Texas, northeastern New Mexico, extreme southeast Colorado, and extending up into Kansas of an inch and a half to some 2 and 3 inch amounts being indicated there. So I'll bring us back full screen here. And there you are. Good. And I have Briller Jeopardy tonight, which is hurricane related. Okay, let's see how everybody's. This is a good one that Scott sent. I like this one. All right, so here it is. Are you ready, Joe?
Yes, I am.
So there are 10 states, okay? 10 states that have had the most landfalling hurricanes since 1851. 10 states. Let's see what the chat board comes up with. The top 10 states with the most landfalls. Okay, ready?
All set? Yeah.
All right, just waiting for the first guest to come on to get posted. And North Carolina, says Johnny Quest. That is number 4. Okay, and Rich Rothmansky, William Uber, and David Fuller have Texas. That is number 2. Abadan Durakovic, I hope I got it right. I apologize if I got it wrong. And Alan Rupa with Florida. That is number 1. So we've got Florida, Texas, 1 and 2. North Carolina is 4. Rich Rothmansky now throws out Louisiana. And Louisiana is number 3 on the list. So we've got the first 4 very, very quickly. So let's see. Rich Rothmansky.
New Orleans is not a state.
Right. It's a state of mind, but it's not a state. Rich Rothmansky says Mississippi. Mississippi is number 8. Number 8. Carol DiChiara says Georgia. Georgia is number 7. Number 7. And Norm Roberts says Alabama. Number 6. Okay, so we've got we need number 5, number 9, and number 10. 5, 9, and 10.
I'm going to bet you one of those last 3 is a northern state. And in fact, not a few people have already put up Maine, Joe. Is Maine in the...
Maine is not on the list.
Oh,
however,
right.
Northern Grace, South Carolina is number 5. And Matt, you write about the northern state, Joe. Maggie P., New York. New York, number 9.
Wow.
So we're only... And Rock Roll and David Fuller get the last one. Virginia. So it's like calling election night with electoral votes here, Joe.
So I would suspect with New York that a lot of that is mostly due to Long Island and probably more eastern Long Island than anything else.
Oh, right. Oh, of course. So just to backtrack here, I'll start. We've got them all. So starting from number 10, Virginia. 9, New York. 8, Mississippi. 7, Georgia. 6, Alabama. 5, South Carolina. 4, North Carolina. 3, Louisiana. 2, Texas. And number 1, not a surprise, Florida. Although if you look back over the last 40 or so years, there was a long stretch where Florida didn't get didn't get anything as far as a landfalling hurricane, and there was even a stretch of years where even a tropical storm didn't even go over the state of Florida. So and then there were years where they got like 3 or 4 of them. But there was, I forgot what year it was. I think they had 4 major hurricanes hit Florida in 6 weeks, something like that. I
That
think
was the year one of them was Wilma.
Yeah, it was in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Now, here's the second question. Since 1980, what hurricane has caused the most deaths in the Atlantic Basin?
I would. Was it Maria?
No.
Because Maria killed. There was about 3,000 fatalities, mostly on Puerto Rico with Maria.
Yeah, but that was not number one, the one with the highest deaths. I'm seeing here. Jason Fox. Congratulations to Jason Fox. Jason Fox got it. Mitch in 1998, 11,000 deaths in Central America.
Wow.
What was the last hurricane to make landfall in New England?
Well, was it Bob?
Hurricane Bob in 1991. August of 91.
Right.
So there you have it. Everybody did great tonight. Things we got stuff, got the answers up there pretty quickly. Very nice. The chat board folks know their hurricanes, Joe.
Well, there you go.
Okay.
Now, concerning the schedule, are we on tomorrow or are we off
So there's
tomorrow?
no show tomorrow. I would love
Okay.
to do a show tomorrow, but I got to do a long 1-day drive and back to Mississippi to go see Mother. So I won't be around tomorrow, but we will Saturday. Unless I get struck by lightning, Saturday, we will be on at noon on Saturday. Okay.
Yes.
No show tomorrow. Saturday at noon. Sunday at 7:35 p.m.
And on Sunday we may have guests.
Yes, we're trying to have guests for Sunday. We'll see how that plays out. The best laid
If I know they're definitely coming, I'll bake a cake.
It's the best laid plans of mice and men. By the way, Tropical Storm Margaret, I'm not going to, spend any time, already mentioned it. 16.8 north, 28.3 west. Okay, so it's way out. It's not that far from the Cabo Verde Islands. West-northwest at 17. Top winds are 40 miles per hour. Minimum pressure based on satellite estimates at 1,004. Pacific Hurricane Hova at night at 17.7 at 117.3, heading for the Pacific Graveyard. Moving west-northwest at 17, 941 millibar pressure, top winds there, 145 miles per hour. And yes, Brandon Doherty, I take the dog with me. JJ goes wherever I go, pretty much, except to the supermarket, which is what I did today. I had this thing, I had to have roast chicken today, so I made roast chicken. And that's it. Got anything else to add, Joe?
Nothing. We'll see you on Saturday at high noon.
Okay, so the Joe and Joe Weather Show brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board and it's on the description of this video, so go take a look. And if you do decide to purchase anything from the Tempest website, use the coupon code I want a weather station and you'll get
10% off.
Omni True Value. What's that?
I said, where else can you get a deal like that?
No, you can't. Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125 is the phone number. Best prices in town. Uh, Keep that in mind just in case if something weird should happen and this thing gets further west, you might need to go for some supplies. You head over to Omni. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com. And just want to say one last thing. Thank you to all who hit the like button tonight. 153 likes on, at least on my monitor, Joe. And also for the 4 people who hit the tip jar tonight. Mark G., David Fuller, Brendan Doherty. Congratulations on your meteorological certificate, Brendan, and Trish Sparaccio.
all right. So everybody, see you Saturday at noon. And by the way, even though there's no live show tomorrow, I will probably do a video very early in the morning. I don't know if I'll get to do the weather in 5, but I'll do my weather in a minute, which is really now a weather in a minute and a half. And there'll be posts on my website. For those of you who are on my subscription page at Patreon, patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Cioffi, there'll be posts up over there. But back to normal on Saturday. So just a little bit of a break tomorrow. So this just going to be pretty much out in the ocean anyway. So I don't know how much it's going to change. So we'll see you on Saturday at noon. Nighty night.
Nighty night, folks.